breaking news! At long last, AMG releases spoilers for Kit Fisto and crew. Matt and Lee discuss.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another box review, sort of preview, I guess, with Lee. Hello, Lee.
Hello! Thank you for having me back.
Yeah, so today we got some more details on Kit Fisto's box. So let's just dive right in. Starting, of course, with the man, the myth, the legend himself. If we look at his main card, he's 8 points, 3/4, nothing too special to see there. That's pretty standard. But we also see he's got 4 speed, riposte, also pretty normal. This new thing, supporting fire, dash. So when I first read this, I thought it was kind of like coordinated fire, or coordinated assault, I should say. And I was like, oh dang, this is awesome. And then I realized he's giving the dash to the attacker, which is less useful, I think, especially in Gar, where there's a lot of melee, where if you're already in range to melee someone, I don't know if you really need the dash all that much. But do you have any thoughts on this fancy new mechanic?
My takeaway from supporting fire dash is that it enables a very risky line of play that melee characters don't usually have, which is something that I find happens from time to time with a melee character is your opponent will be, let's say, on the wrong elevation of the point, and then you are put in this weird spot of, do I just advance to the point of the right elevation and then just not attack? Which is a perfectly valid line of play. Maybe you hunker instead. Or do you go on the wrong elevation, try to shove them off, maybe do some damage, and then you're kind of in this weird no man's land of like, well, now I'm the one that's on the wrong elevation. And I think with supporting fire climb, it opens up the possibility that you actually chase someone who's on the wrong level and then like maybe dash towards an ingress.
It's his big support ability, and then his identity is very selfish, I would say. Depending which stance he's in, he's either getting steadfast and adding an expertise to defense rolls. He would still get this expertise even when he's exposed, so that's pretty good. Or he gets protection and immunity from pin. And then finally, when he would advance, he would reposition instead, which works well with force speed or just on his activation. It's harder to pin him down. So let's look at those stances and kind of keep that in mind as we look. So I think let's start with Shicho, where he would get steadfast and 1 expertise. I think this is like a very solid stance. It's kind of everything I want. The expertise scales really well. At just 2, you're getting a couple crits, plus a hit. You're getting 2 blocks every single time, no matter what you roll, because you're always going to add at least 1 expertise. Lots of early shoves. It's not spectacular, but it's very solid, I would say.
Yeah. I especially like that. I mean, you and I know how valuable Steadfast is. I think the real challenge for me in looking at this is like not just living in Shicho the whole time. Just because I like Steadfast and I like easy shoves. Very consistent,
Agreed.
which I like.
And that's why I was so excited when I thought supporting fire was coordinated assault, because having a steadfast guy you can move around, great.
Yeah.
Still, we'll see what supporting fire can do, but steadfast is still good, and that's kind of the main appeal of Kit, I think. He's just a guy who's a fairly solo operator for good and for bad. And you say you want to live in Shicho. If we look at Ataru, yeah, I'm probably not flipping to this stance as much. It has much worse defense. You get some crit mitigation, but you've got worse dice, worse results overall on defense. You get 9 attack dice, which is pretty cool. The tree's kind of funky. I don't know. It seems very situational.
Yeah. I like that you still get a shove on 1, but like you don't get into easy crits. Your second result is always some level of healing, which, I think there's a lot of utility to that. I think that's what I kind of see with this tree. It is the utility tree where it's like, oh man, I really need to get a potentially triple jump or triple shove. It was like, okay, well,
you can triple shove just probably. Hard to say just as well because it is 2 less dice, but you can triple shove in Shicho. But I think Ataru, if for whatever reason you're saying, hey, I need to punch this guy and then jump 2 or 3 times, sure, I guess Yeah.
It's a funny little thing to throw in there. I do think that this reminds me a lot of Obi. He has that stance that generally doesn't get used, and it feels like it's got a very
Yeah.
similar profile.
And that's the thing. I'd rather take steadfast and expertise on defense rather than protection and pin immunity pretty much every time.
Exactly.
So that's kind of all there is for Kit. As I say, we'll see more synergy stuff when we switch to the list section. But now let's look at the first of actually two secondaries that show up in this box. Nahdar Vebb, Jedi Knight. He is a 5, and he doesn't actually bring any force. So immediately we're kind of thinking, hey, he's competing with Shaak Ti. And if we look at the tags, it's kind of similar. They're both Force user Jedi, Galactic Republic, who are not Padawans. So that's a big thing. Jedi who aren't Padawans. They're both 8 health, so similarities there. He has to choose to either dash himself or another Galactic Republic character. She gets to dash someone else and get a jump herself, which is better. He can spend a force to add some dice, but that's also going to conflict with things like supporting fire or coordinated fire, stuff like that. He does get a dash towards primary units after they make a move action, so it's very similar to Hunter in that way, which can be a pretty good ability. And then I'm guessing this is why he's a 5, is I've been waiting for this. When a primary or secondary unit ends, basically a bunch of different movement types, engage with him, heals and refreshes. I don't know if the heals are going to be super useful, because I have a feeling he's just going to be either alive or fully dead.
Yeah.
But I do like that this gets around the Firebrand problem, where she needs a move action to end engaged with her, whereas he just needs you know, if you spend one to like defensive maneuver or force speed or whatever, then he can still get that force refresh.
This is obviously why you want to bring Mother Talzin with him, so that you can manipulating head people into range of him, so you get some cheeky heals and refreshes.
And refresh a force, so then it's kind of like a one force manipulating hand. Funky. I'll give you that.
Very fun.
That's I don't think we're going to see that as our list, but
I don't think so.
He strikes me as pretty bland for a 5, but if we look at his stance, yeah, it doesn't help that much, honestly. 4/4 in defense is pretty squishy.
Yeah.
His attack tree, I'd say it's nothing really to write home about. Like, it's not bad, but it's not great. I'd say Ahsoka secondary is almost better, because she can at least shove on one. I'm not trying to be too much of a downer on Nahdar. It's just I'm seeing it's hard to justify him over someone like Shaak Ti.
Yeah. Especially at a 5 cost range. I understand that they tried to fulfill somewhat similar ideas, and like it is access to extra force, whether Shaak Ti just brings it or Nahdar just gives you access to that regen. 5 is an interesting place for the Gar, because I think the vaunted ARF tend to be that thing that causes you to play a point down. So like getting any sort of 5 in there is like a nice thing to do, and like I always like having options.
It's not really a penalty, really. If you're going to play 2 8-point characters anyways, you're probably playing ARFs. You might as well toss a 5 in there.
I kind of see him as like, kind of going back to what you said, a weird tank, in this idea that like he has sustain, he has the ability to get you some force back. If you have some way of giving him protection, then I think he's got a little bit more value. But yeah, I think he's probably going to die a whole lot.
I mean, he can throw 10 dice at primaries if he's spending a force. I think you want him in lists where you can really burn through force, which is similar, I would say, to our next unit, Commander Phil, who's another secondary, and he's 3 points. So you're probably not going to be playing him under Kit all that much. There are some more expensive primaries that you might want to put Commander Phil under. He has an ability to move himself with a climb, which is good. He's got ways to add dice attacking primaries, and he can help with conditions. But I think the big thing is this reactive ability. We specialize in making entrances. It's an enticing ability. I'm not going to lie. It does, again, conflict with stuff like coordinated fire because it triggers off an attack. You also have to have the defender within range 2 of an active objective after the attack, which kind of means you failed in a sense if you're trying to shove them away, or maybe you shoved them onto a different elevation, but it gives you out of activation moves for Jedi. And that's pretty broad, giving supports and secondaries ways to move characters in their activation is pretty powerful.
I do like that a full advance for a Jedi is pretty neat, especially with Kit, who can make that a reposition. It's also one of the few ways that you could actually move someone like OP2.
I think a theme for this box is that the costs are kind of, even same for we can take him down easy. Paying 1 force for 2 extra dice, maybe sometimes. All these abilities, once Phil is wounded, once Vebb is wounded, and they start going up to 2 force, or even, if someone like Kit gets wounded, I don't know if I'm going to want to use supporting fire for a dash when it's 1 force. So a lot of things that kind of get expensive quickly, but maybe that's where Vebb can come in and help with, hopefully, lots and lots of force regen if you can get him in the right spot. We should touch on Phil's tree, and look, hey, he doesn't get shoved until 3, so yeah, you're not going to be shoving people away very often, potentially. He does prefer melee. Yeah, I prefer pawns attacking, but pawns struggles with self-movement, so that's what you're getting here with Phil.
Yeah, there's not a whole bunch to write home about with the tree, nor the expertise. But he's a 3, and as a 3, I think he's a very competent 3. I think obviously there's some sort of question there in regards to whether you go with pawns or you go with him if you need to find someone to fill a 3 spot. But yeah, I think he's fine.
And if you're taking him, I do think you're leaning into that reactive, which means you're probably taking Phil's clones as a support as well, because they have that Phil's squad tag to be able to make a Jedi advance. They're pretty standard. They've got defensive maneuver, brothers in arms. They've also got we can take him down easy. They've got another supporting fire, which is a heal, which situationally seems useful, I guess. It would, if you started the attack strained, you could potentially heal that strain before it would trigger and give you 3 damage, but it's not as universally useful as something like slapping down a pin, or obviously, an expose, or something like that. But 8 health isn't bad.
I personally actually really like supporting fire heal. I think it attacking while strained is definitely the sort of the standout application of that. But I feel like there are just so many times where, especially when you're playing Gar, you really need to be able to, say for instance, move someone onto a point out of activation. And how often do you get, they're strained and that's going to be real bad for them, or they're pinned and now I can't do that at all. So you have to essentially burn a movement ability, and you don't want to spend a whole action healing them, or you're maybe I could just find a heal somewhere in the tree when I roll this. Phil's clones help to answer that problem.
That's true. Yeah, because maybe you're attacking with someone who doesn't actually get heals, or in the stance or whatever path you're going down the tree, you're not going to heal. But if you place yourself within 2 of the person you do want to heal, but again, probably something I'm never ever going to use once they're wounded and I have to pay 1 for it. Their combat tree is funky. If you want to wound people, don't be using this because there's not a lot of damage. It's a shove on 2 though, which that is good, and they kind of have some hunter synergy, I would say, because they're usually pushing hits through. They're better than ARFs in that they're getting 2 hits on 2 expertise. Because I find with something like 212th or Clone Commandos, there tend to be crit fishing, which means if I pair them with Hunter, they're not getting a ton of value out of that because they're usually having all their hits canceled anyways. Phil's clones, they kind of get around that, so that's something.
Go for Valdi.
But otherwise, nothing too spectacular, I would say.
Yeah. It's weird. I feel like with the support fire heal ability, their tree kind of makes me think that they're more like combat medics more than anything else. They're fine. I think kind of like what you're saying there. Their ideal target is someone that they want to overwhelm with hits, as opposed to I'm just going to fish for 1 crit. Because it's an interesting tree in that you're bringing them mostly to do a very little bits of chip damage. Hopefully you get to shove on 2. And then aside from that, it's okay.
a double shoving support is pretty hard to come by in
That's true.
Gar, which is something we noted with the Padawans. And obviously these guys can do it from range 5. It takes a bit of a spike to get 4 down their tree, but it can happen. Like, again, to go back to ARFs, I get 4 down their tree semi-regularly. So it's not impossible. That helps a lot with dealing with steadfast units or people who are really on an objective. Now that we've gone over quickly over all the 4 units in the box, let's dive into some lists. So I guess I'll start with one of mine. We'll do a little sandwich, go back and forth. I want to start with just a very nice, simple 2-box list, which is Kit with Vebb, of course, and then Phil's clones. Pair those guys with Padme and her box. So I don't think this is necessarily a, big tournament winning the next meta list or anything like that. But I think Padme herself suffers from being a bit slow, especially because she wants to use Royal Command on other people rather than herself. So something like supporting fire from Kit really helps her here. And, the rest of her box can be pretty fast, but hey, more dashes, I'll take it. So I'm really leaning into that aspect of Kit.
The thing I really like about that, especially from playing Padme, is so often you get this weird, like, oh, I really want to focus and get a dash, and then I want to take a shot, but it's not going to be enough to get me to the point, and I really need to get that little bit of extra distance, so I'm really hoping to get a bunch of shoves, or I'm trying to hit a dash somewhere, and supporting fire dash is a real simple solution. You do have this sort of like this wealth of support fire, coordinate fire options, and as you start to take wounds, like certain options just don't become appealing anymore. Like paying a force for a heal on support fire heal doesn't seem that great. But when you've just got like a ton of different options to pull from, it sort of lessens the impact that your opponent might have, where it's like, oh, I really need to just single that out, and then they just lose all their supporting fires because they're not going to pay for it. Here, you've got like lots of options, which is nice.
So what did you build for us today?
Oh, well, in the interest of going a little funky, I tried to do a Kit Mace pairing. A couple of things I like about this weird little pairing is, again, it's one of the few ways that you could actually move OB2 with a Jedi shift via Phil. Mace offers protection, and since you've got a bunch of ways of like moving people, again, like a little bit like the Padme box, I find that one of the ways that Mace gets neutered is when he's stuck too far back and you need to like slowly move him up. I think that this could be a way of not only like letting him get into the fight, but also letting him hop into the next fight afterwards.
The Phil and Phil's clones being able to move Mace if he ends up out of activation, out of engagement, get back into engagement. That's one of Mace's big weaknesses, is when he doesn't have that bubble up. And he brings a lot of force, which this squad is going to want to use a lot of force. So I think he makes a lot of sense here. My final list is kind of built in a similar vein to the first list, which is, hey, how much value can I get out of supporting fire dash from Kit? So I've just gone with a Bad Batch, Kit, and ARFs, of course. You could put in clone commandos there if you want to be doing some fun scaling maneuvers, not bad. You've got a lot of steadfast units, some decent tankiness. Oftentimes Wrecker wants to go along the bottom of his tree for more damage and conditions, but the top of his tree in boom stance, you want the dash, so this kind of alleviates that. And you can just do some silly stuff with Hunter, who's already getting too many moves. You can just go to 11 with supporting fire dash on Hunter.
Something I really like about that sort of pair up that you have is, I often find that if you have to lean one way or the other, lean in with a bunch of ranged over having a bunch of melee. I think having a 5 of your 6 units be melee only is a real problem, but I think in what you've proposed, it's like, I think that's fine. You've got one good melee heavy hitter, but like, let's be honest, Hunter is a fine melee heavy hitter as well. He gets a lot of work done, and I really like that there is a door there for, hey, I need Hunter to go from like one corner of the board to the other, and I think in the list you proposed, that's very reasonable.
Yes, exactly. I think you can have a lot of fun with this list for sure. So,
Cool.
Yeah, that's our review of Kit's box. I'm not convinced that these guys will see like tip-top level play. Not everything does have to though, and I think he's an overall solid unit with Kit who just
Exactly.
maybe I'm just not seeing his niche right away. So someone might come up with something really exciting that we all want to play with Kit. Thank you, Lee, for joining once again, giving your insights, and we'll see you guys next time.
Absolutely. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.